If you're eating healthy, sleeping well, and exercising, and you still don't feel the way you want, it may be time to consider your thought life, because what goes on inside of our minds, the beliefs that we hold, and the thoughts that we choose to ruminate on, will have a powerful influence on our physical outcomes. The mind-body connection is well documented in medical literature. Now, I'm not saying that the beliefs that we hold and the thoughts that we have are solely responsible for our health outcomes. They're not. We can't just think ourselves into being healthy. But the thoughts that we have will have an influence over our physical outcomes. So, again, if we're doing everything right and we seem to be stuck, this may be the issue you need to address. In today's podcast episode, I'm talking with Dr. Ryan Wohlfert, who is a mindset expert, and he does a great job of bridging the gap between the mind and the body. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Ryan Wohlfert.
So learn your language is all about aligning in identifying that inner voice with the story that you're telling yourself about your health, about your relationships, about anything in your life that is holding you back. So I guess that would be aligning yourself. What are those limiting beliefs?
Welcome to the Natural Health Matters podcast, where it's all about maximizing your health potential so that you can look and feel your best at any age. I'm your host, David Sandstrom, naturopathic doctor and biblical health coach, and this is episode number 85. Today we have on the show Dr. Ryan Wohlfert. Dr. Wohlfert is a certified mindset specialist, a certified chiropractic sports and biophysics physician. He's helped thousands of people incorporate a healthy lifestyle to make natural, pain-free living possible. Dr. Wohlfert, welcome to Natural Health Matters.
Thanks for having me, David. I appreciate you allowing me to come on here and share this important message of mindset and even dispelling some of the misconceptions people have about it.
Yeah, excellent. I really appreciate you taking the time. You know, as most of the listeners on this show know, that my contention is that we maximize our health potential by aligning our lives more fully with God's natural design for spirit, mind, and body. And today we're going to be talking about the mental portion, and everybody's heard of working out, but I think some of us need to do some working in, and because we all have some limiting beliefs that are holding us back from achieving our goals. Now, you say that according to the National Science Foundation, 80% of the 60,000 thoughts we have every day are negative, and 95% of those thoughts are recurring. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people listening, or most people listening, understand inherently that just in their daily lives, they're more likely to just focus on the negative thoughts or focus on the negative comments or replies or whatever that people make to them, right? Because our brain is geared towards that for our protection. Like, for example, in our practices, you and I, we have to train our brains to do this. But in general, our default mode network is we could have 99 patients, 99 clients say, you know what, you did a great, I appreciate your help with this. And then we have one that says that wasn't happy or gave us a bad review. In which one is our brain,
and which one do we focus on?
And it's that same thing in life. And so we have to train our brains to actually focus on the opposite, because that's not the default network that we take. So if we know that that's happening out, and I love that expression, we have to work in, not just work out. I love that. That's beautiful. I'm going to have to steal that one or borrow it and cite you. I love that. But think about all the thoughts that we have on a daily basis. And here's the thing. Most of these thoughts aren't even conscious because our brain doesn't have that bandwidth. Consciously, we have every moment, every second, we have inputs coming into our brain, into our body. And our brain has to decipher of those 4 billion inputs, both, all physical, mental, psychological, emotional, all either outside of us or inside of us, that it's scanning to see, okay, is this safe or unsafe? It has to whittle it down. These 4 billion, they're not obviously conscious to you, right? These conscious thoughts.
Right.
But it has to whittle it down to
Right.
like basically 7 to 11 conscious thoughts that we can have. So there's a lot going on in the background. So of these 60,000 thoughts that we have every day that are negative, or sorry, the 80% of the 60,000 that are negative, most of are playing in the background, directing our actions, habits, and behaviors. So if we're constantly just trying to fix our actions and behaviors to create great healthy habits, like eating better, like exercising, like journaling, like praying, then it's going to be met with not necessarily resistance, but you're going to probably get frustrated because it's not going to stick, because we have these stories that we keep telling ourselves, these negative thoughts that are playing in the background that are recurring it over and over and over again. So that's a little bit more background of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I say, don't listen to what somebody says. Watch what they do. If you want to know what's going on in their mind, look at their actions, because the beliefs drive actions, and we can see their actions. And if we observe that, we know what their beliefs are. So I think that's kind of along the lines of what you're talking about here. So we've got to get to the root of, instead of dealing with the symptoms of these incorrect beliefs, get to the root and address those beliefs. And then the symptoms will improve all on their own.
Yes. Oh, exactly. We are improving the health of our mind, of our body, of our spirit. Too many times I think we focus on, and that's part of maybe those negative thoughts too. We try to figure out, okay, why is this happening? Or how can I get rid of this symptom? How can I get rid of this malady or ailment, rather than, okay, how can I improve what I'm putting into my body, into my mind? And by a side effect, I call that a side effect, automatically and amazingly, I say that sarcastically because that's how it works. Amazingly, your body gets better. Your body heals. These symptoms go away. And the healing process can start like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean the symptom's going to go away that fast. Just like I use this example in my office when I'm trained as a chiropractor. So if I give an adjustment, for example, and somebody said, well, it still hurts. It's like, well, yes, the healing has started, but now we have to continue that. Just like if you stepped on a nail, right? If you stepped on a nail and it's stuck in there or attack, and you pull it out, guess what? Does the pain go away immediately? No, because the damage is done, but now the healing can start that nail is out of your foot. So that the healing starts right away, immediately, just like with these 4 pillars that we're going to be talking about with mindset, but you might not feel the effect and feel that adaptation immediately.
Yeah, that's really good. I was going through my devotion this morning, and the study was talking about 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and then cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So it starts with confession and acknowledgement that we've done something, a little bit amiss. And then we need forgiveness, sure. But if forgiveness is kind of like pulling the nail out. But now we've got to start being cleansed from that unrighteousness, right? And the healing process takes place. So I think that really fits with what you just said.
Isn't that amazing how that works out, right? And my devotion today was about Joseph and like the betrayal, and how, again, we have these obstacles and these circumstances and situations in our lives, just like he did, but we have to be faithful in what God is planning for us, in not to us. He's not doing this to us, but what he's planning for us, just like Joseph did. And then that, eternity in heaven can come. And so, yeah, that's right. I love getting in when I do my devotions in this 3-minute devotions book. I basically I close my eyes and I just like flick through it, and whatever it stops on, that's what I'm reading for the day. And there's always an application for the day. And I'm like shaking my head, smiling that was the one for the day, because it always hits at that right time.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, and Joseph had a role to play in all that, right? He didn't just say, hey, God, fix all this.
Right.
No, God was there. He was with him. But that story account says over and over, God was with Joseph, but Joseph had a role to play.
Yes.
he had to step up to the plate,
Mhm.
right? It was his turn on stage. And the same is true with all of us.
Yes, exactly. And that's, I want to mention another like survey or study that was done that matches with it's the actions, but our beliefs direct the actions, and how we feel about ourselves direct our healthy actions. And the International Association of Applied Psychology actually did this study of 2.5 million Americans. And what it found was, again, I'll just summarize it. When you don't feel good about yourself and who you are, again, your identity, your being, then you don't necessarily do healthy stuff, right? You might do it for a short period of time, but not a
Right.
longer period of time. So again, these unconscious drivers, we call them in the mindset world, they are driving and directing our actions and habits, not the other way around. Now, yes, we have to do the work, of course, but how can we limit or avoid or get rid, I want to say get rid of, identify these limiting beliefs that we have that are directing our conscious actions? Because we can go to all the self-help seminars we want. We can read all the health books that we want. We can, do the latest workout and do the latest cleanser fast. But how is that going to sustain us? Is that going to sustain us and be sustainable? Because we can't out goal set an unsuccessful mindset. I'll have to credit that with my mentor, Brian Grasso, where I learned this system
That's
from
good.
the Eliminate Your Limit system.
Good stuff. Yeah, I want to just apply one more analogy to this before we jump into the 4 steps, and that is I learned this from Dr. David Ferguson, who wrote the book Intimate Encounters, and it's a book for enhancing relational connectedness in marriage. And he talks about early on in the book the concept of an emotional cup. And the idea is each one of us has a limited capacity to handle emotions, and we can think of it as a cup. And for most of us, our cups are full of the junk, the anger, the disappointment, the resentment, maybe even bitterness or rage. And when our cup gets filled up with all that junk, then we have very little room left for the good stuff like love, joy, and peace. So what happens is when we get stressed or our cup gets pushed, that stuff starts to spill out of the top of the cup. And the stuff that spills out is things like, biting sarcasm, stonewalling, all those negative things that take place in a relationship, the stuff that people find themselves in the counselor's office talking about. But those are just symptoms. The problem is their emotional cup is full. If they can drain that emotional cup, primarily through forgiveness, confession and forgiveness, then the symptoms just kind of disappear on their own. So that's what we're talking about here. If we can address our limiting beliefs, the beliefs that are based in falsehoods, then we're going to live a healthier, more productive, more fulfilled life. Am I on the right track here?
Well, yes, and I love that. I mean, I love your cup analogy. That is a beautiful, perfect analogy. And I use a similar one like with health and the stress and threat bucket. But no, I mean, as you're speaking, it reminded me of what's called the negative cycle of like, so we all have this cycle, or we have triggers that trigger these catastrophizing thoughts, and it could be like those negative emotions or those non-serving emotions in the moment, the anger, the fear. It could be a trigger like being lonely. I'll tell you my triggers, like where my mind starts racing too much, is if it's similar to a lot of people. If I'm hungry, right? If I don't have the sugar, or sorry, the fuel going to my brain, well, now it's going to be
Right.
more reactive in the back. If I'm tired, if I haven't gotten, good sleep, if I'm lonely, if I'm by myself and just allowing my thoughts to go, if I haven't gotten enough like movement or activity, if I'm sitting at a desk all day or, standing too much and not actually having purposeful movement. Well, now that's going to lead into this cycle of negative thoughts where I'm going to, I feel this loneliness. I feel these thoughts, these that are flooding in, and then it's affecting my actions. So now instead of serving actions, now I take more like it's called self-soothing, where I might binge watch TV, or I might avoid and procrastinate on things that I know I should be doing. And then when I do that, Well, now I go into the descent. I go into the pit of being passive aggressive, of these emotions and these things coming out, like you said, when it spills out into different symptoms. How do I feel? How do I act? So and then guess what? That leads right back into the more triggers and more self-soothing. And that's why it's the cycle. And if we can catch that cycle wherever we can, but especially those triggers, and head it off at the pass, then it's not going to lead to that spillover. So yes, I totally love that.
Yeah, we're on the same page on that for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the 4 steps process. Yes. So fill me in. I'm curious to hear too, because I really don't know them.
All right. So I'll mention them first, the four pillars of mindset training. So learn your language, count your wins, review your direction, imagine your outcome. And I mentioned them just to put it out there. And there's steps, but the way I teach it and the way I instruct people to do it is in this order, but it doesn't have to be. We have to try, we have to learn from it, we have to grow and adapt if we need to. So let's start with learn your language. So we mentioned that these negative recurring thoughts tend to be mostly unconscious, right? They're playing in the background. We don't necessarily hear them. We're distracted by so many other things in our lives that we're go, go, go a lot of the times. And then even the symptoms that we feel, we're so preoccupied with those, we don't know that voice. And we all have a voice. Don't worry, you're not crazy for having this voice speaking to you. And sometimes it helps to think of it, that's the devil that is trying to get into you, that is trying to make you do things or think things that aren't necessarily true. So learn your language is all about aligning in identifying that inner voice with the story that you're telling yourself about your health, about your relationships, about anything in your life that is holding you back. So I guess that would be aligning yourself. What are those limiting beliefs? Because in this, mindset, we hear, okay, just think positive, just say affirmations. But these voices, this language that is playing, this internal dialogue that is directing us, if we don't bring it out of the shadows, if we don't identify that it's there, it's going to continue, that the story that it's telling is going to continue directing you in the way that you've been going. And we all have them. We just have to align to that. And the way that I do that and instruct people to do it is I use a journal. I write down. So at the beginning of the day, in the morning, and it's usually after I get up, drink my water, do some like brain neuro training exercises, then do mobility work. Because I want to put my mindset I've been doing this for a long time in a more serving place. So I check in with myself. And I ask myself things like, what am I thinking? What am I doing? What are my actions? What have they been? Have they been serving me or not? How am I feeling? Like, what are my physical symptoms? And then even what are my, no, those are the 4, sorry. What am I thinking? How am I feeling emotionally? How am I feeling physically? And then what are my actions? Am I procrastinating? Am I avoiding
That's
things?
really good. Yeah. So that's kind of like a process of discovery, right? Let's try to get underneath the surface here, have a little look under the hood, so to speak, and figure out if I'm having some thoughts. And I think what I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you're feeling stressed in some way, or you're feeling, I don't know, short-tempered or whatever, it might be worth exploring, well, why do I feel that way? And that might point to the negative thought. Am I right?
Yes. In what we want to get better at as we go is at the beginning, you might start experiencing it, that emotion, too much, or experiencing it and then going down into that pit, going down into the descent. Yeah. Instead of just what we want to get to is a point of just observing it, just seeing that it's there, understanding that it's in the background, and then eventually it becomes less and less and less. And what I want everybody to understand is these thoughts are never and honestly, we never want them to go away. They're not a bad thing. They're not, they're there to protect us, but we don't need them to protect us from getting that email written or talking to a spouse. We don't need that to protect us from that. So we can, instead of it being,
Can you give us an example of what a negative or a false thought would look like? Just something
so things like,
typical.
so you could just the things that you're telling yourself, like, I'm so stupid. I'm not enough. I'm never like, if our health, I'm never going to be healthy. I'm always going to have this. A lot of times a common expression is, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it. So like these can'ts and always, those are almost little triggers like, oh, that's, is there a can't? Is there a always? Because if that's the truth that you're in reality that you think you're in, is that really the truth? And we want to start poking holes in the language that we're saying and change the meaning of the story. Because, I'm not going to sit here and say, maybe you had a bad lot in life. Maybe you were abused. Maybe, you've been through divorce. Maybe all this stuff. That stuff happened, but the meaning of that doesn't have to be your downfall. The meaning of that doesn't have to take you into that descent. We can choose to accept that and be aware of, okay, what does this mean now? Or how did this work out in my favor? And that actually jumps into the second pillar, which we'll get to, is counting your wins and retraining the brain, because learning your language is all about deconstructing that narrative and that story that we have, identifying what that story is. And then like step 1A is just in the moment interrupting that thought. You can do it a couple ways. One, as you're getting used to it, setting aside 5-10 minutes a day, just getting in the habit of writing it down instead of just in your brain. Either get it out, like dictating it into a microphone or video or something like that, or writing it down. I know when I'm in that descent, in that negative cycle, when my cup is overflowing, if I continue lying in bed, allowing those thoughts to go, instead of just getting up and moving, journaling, and getting it out, it tends to snowball even more if I don't identify that trigger and do the things that I know that has helped me to stop that negative cycle, to get that the cup emptied out as fast as possible, so that it's not dictating what I'm doing.
That's good stuff.
during my day. So they could do it then. And then you can also, I'll mention this, is again, as you get more familiar with what that inner story is, now throughout the day, if it pops up, you'll be able to identify it. And then in the moment, this is one of I'm leaving you on the edge of your seat right here, because this is one of the biggest things that helped me out in the beginning when I learned this for myself, is you identify it, become aware of it, and then you interrupt it. Just, you say it's there, you have this, maybe a kill switch, we call it, where it's like something that brings you out of that unconscious narrative into the conscious, where you're like, all right, stop. That was one of mine, was, okay, stop. I hear you, I see you, stop. In the beginning, that thought might come back a minute later, 2 minutes later. Just interrupt it again and again and again. And you're training your brain to just not even getting in a conversation with that. So these different kill switches that I've used is, okay, stop. Said, how is this serving me today? Like just something like that, something that we're consciously saying to ourselves. What would Jesus do? That's another really good one.
Yeah.
In those things definitely help us to identify the language, learn our language, and then also a little tip there of interrupting it in the moment. It doesn't matter if it comes back 50 times a day. You just interrupt it and you get better at it the more you practice it.
Excellent. I'd like to back up and review just a couple of things you said, because you dropped a lot of value bombs there. One is when we use the word never or always, that should be an alert for us. That should be a red flag to say, wait, is something always going to happen? Is it never going to get fixed? One of the things we go over with couples in our marriage group is, if you're saying to yourself, things will never change. Well, then you're claiming that you know the future. So who's the only one that knows the future? That's God, right? So when you say things will never change, you're playing God. Stop that, right? That's not a productive thought. So the words never or always should be an alert for us. Well, wait a minute. Let me re-examine that thought. Is that really true? Probably not. And then the other one was to write those thoughts down. So we have to think it, right? But we got to get it outside of our minds and make it tangible. So the process of writing, we experience it with our senses. We experience a kinesthetic, movement of the hand, and we actually see the words on the page. And then I would add to that, read it to yourself out loud so that you can hear it and engage another one of your senses. And it makes it more tangible and more real. It takes the intangible, what's on the inside, and makes it tangible. And now we can deal with this monster a little bit better.
Yes, beautiful summary. I wholeheartedly agree. And, with learning your language, and I mentioned it, we want to get to a point where we're hopefully right at the beginning, where we're just observing it. It's not us that is saying that. It's something. It's this unconscious story that we keep telling ourselves that has been, I don't know, I'll use the word implanted, that has been in our brains and building a lot of times since childhood. So it's been there for a long time, whether it's our parents,
Right.
teachers, pastors, religious leaders, whoever. And the thing is, these thoughts, they're not real. They're not based in reality. Your story tells you they are, but just like how you said, David, is that the actual truth? If you think that's the actual truth and there's no other options, that means you know everything and you're playing God, which you're not. So yes, and we want to move on. I don't say move on, but like I said, learn your language is the deconstructing part of it. Just like if we have an old shack of a house that, maybe was burned down and we can't really remodel, we got to knock it all down. And now we have this fresh plot of land that we can start reconstructing the house that we want. And that's the mindset. Excellent. So now that's where we start with count your wins. Another way to say it is finding the evidence, because count your wins sometimes sounds like it's just positive thinking. With positive thinking, why that doesn't work always or as much as counting your wins is, when I think of positive thinking, I'm thinking that you're saying things that maybe haven't happened yet, but that you want. I am healthy. I am going to be healthy. I am getting, I am rich. I am enough. These types of positive thinking. But what count your wins is you're actually identifying, you're actually listing out the forward progress of your towards your goals. So you think about, what is your goal? Like, what goal do you want, whether it's for your health, your wealth, your relationships, your business, whatever it is. And every day you sit down and you bring conscious thoughts to that. Let me give you an example. So a colleague of mine, actually, she presented about this journaling process on my chronic pain masterclass a few weeks ago. And she's a mindset specialist. But 5 years ago, she was bedridden. She was bedridden with pain and just suicidal thoughts. But she started to count her wins. And she was in a spot where it's not like she was out running a mile every day or 2 miles. We're like, all right, that's my win. Her wins, a lot of times during the day, was she got up from bed and went to the bathroom by herself.
Wow.
So she slowly and consistently and simply practiced counting the blessings, the gratitude. And sometimes gratitude is hard for people to understand, because gratitude, you want the emotion. But if you're so down in the dumps, you can't muster up that emotion. But if we can identify the actual things, the actions that we've taken towards the goals that we have on a daily basis and writing those down, now we're bringing our conscious thoughts to that rather than the unconscious narrative that we've been saying over and over again. So counting your wins, finding the evidence every day. Typically after dinner is when I will do this. But even throughout the day, you can do it. But to give somebody a framework at the end of, I would say not necessarily at the end of your day, because then other thoughts can come and maybe interrupt your sleep. After dinner, you write down, okay, what are the things that I did today that led me towards my goal? Like and actually, it doesn't matter how small they are. It doesn't have to be a big aha moment. You ran a marathon, that you had no processed food today, that you had 9 hours of quality sleep. In the last 12 to 24 hours, what are the things that led you towards reaching your goal? And that is finding the evidence, that is counting your wins, and that's starting to reconstruct and retrain your brain. This is, if you're so down in the dumps, and I use that word a lot, or that term a lot, if you're so down like my colleague was, that, you know what, that's all you're hearing is the story. All you're hearing is the language. Sometimes, and a lot of times, we start with count your wins and train you to do that. Start with that, because if we want to have some wins, we want our brain to see the actual great things that we're doing, no matter how small they are, that are leading us to that. So that's
I like that a lot. That speaks to the idea of brain neuroplasticity. And they say neurons that fire together wire together, right? So we want to start making those neural connections, make a thought habit pattern where those neurons get stronger and those connections get stronger and stronger. And that's what you're talking about here. And that's really good stuff. This is based in really good science. I love it. It's good.
Yes,
really good stuff.
It absolutely is science. It melds the neurology, the science, and the application of it. So it's really neat. I mean, I remember my mom always saying, just think positive. And she still, when I was growing up, it's think positive. And I'm like, yeah, right. And just little things I think back to my life where, I play sports, and I still do, but even in high school, or I play basketball. And it's these, and how we frame our wording, and how we frame our what we're telling ourselves. I would go in for a layup, and if I would say, don't miss it, rather than make it, a lot of times I miss it, right?
Yeah, right.
We're gearing our brains towards the negative rather than, all right, let's work on that. And so when I make it, and I make the winning shot, or not even, or just if I'm done at the end of the day, or at the end of a workout, at the end of a session, or I make my smoothies. Like before we hopped on here, David, I made my smoothies for tomorrow for my wife and I. And I put them in the blender, and then I didn't blend it up yet. I saved that for tomorrow. So I'm saving time with that. And I'm also doing something healthy
Great
for
idea.
me. So that is a win. So like every day, I do this every day. I write down, made my smoothie. I write down, like, if I had some healthy foods, or whatever healthy foods that I had to eat for lunch, maybe salmon, maybe cod, maybe sardines, like I'm going to have today, I write that down. Or if it's on my schedule or my list, I'll circle it and bring my conscious awareness to that. So that's part of counting your wins and finding the evidence of how you're reaching your goals. And this is a simple and consistent practice.
So that process becomes like a snowball. It just gets snowball going down a hill. It's getting bigger and bigger as we put that into practice.
Yes, exactly. So these next two, and the review your direction and then imagine your outcome, they're very similar to count your wins. Again, those three there are reconstructing narratives, are reconstructing things that we're doing. And you notice there's three of those and only one deconstructing, which is learn your language. Because we want to put it in our favor, 3-1, the neuroplasticity part of retraining the brain and the neurology. So review your direction. How this is described is, so remember, you have your goals, your intentions. And so this is the daily review of your goals. So count your wins is the actions that you take going towards your goals. Review your direction is, okay, I have this direction that I want to lose 30 pounds. I want to gain muscle, those types of things. I want to walk my daughter down the aisle whatever these are. I want to look, these more short-term type, I guess, direction that you're going. So you look at that, and same thing, you can ask yourself questions. And eventually, and so this is what I've done a majority of my mornings is instead of learn your language, I've progressed to a point where I check in real quick, what's my language? But then I review my direction towards the goals that I want. So, and it's further reinforcing. So asking yourself things like, why did I create this goal in the first place? What is it going to feel like when I get there or when I achieve this goal? What, yes. So more of, I guess you would consider that more of the positive thinking aspect of it, but still you're tapping into the emotion behind it. How is it going to feel when I reach this goal? Why did I set it in the first place? How is this serving me? Why is this, and why questions are really good because then it just, and sometimes you don't even need to answer it. It's just asking your brain the question is, why did I do this? And why did I do this in the first place? Why did I create this goal? Why is it going to feel so good when I reach this goal? Those types of things, because then your brain starts perseverating on that, starts thinking about that and getting just engulfed in that, which is what we want.
I often say this, when we find our why, we'll find our way.
Yes.
And the converse is also true. If we don't know our why, we won't find our way. Yeah. So that's really good. To know why you're setting this goal to begin with will be a lifeline for you when you feel like quitting, you feel like giving up. You just pull out that piece of paper that you wrote down your why on, and you'll find your motivation.
Yes, I love it. Exactly. And guess what? This, like reviewing your direction or these goals, they can evolve. You might have set it.
Yeah.
And 2-3 months, down the road, you might be like, you know what? Because you are evolving as a person, as a spiritual being, as you keep unlayering things that you can do, guess what? Those goals are going to probably change too. Just like, again, my colleague who her goal was to be able to get out of bed and not, be bedridden for a day. Well, now she's actually a mindset coach. So look how her goals have evolved over time. She's, exercising. Yeah. She's doing all these other things. And so that can change.
That's incredible.
So that's review your direction every day.
And she used this process?
Yeah. Yes. This is how she got started.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Well, what you're talking about is just simple truth here. And if someone has achieved success, they're going to have to do something like this, right? Because this is the truth. This is what works.
Yes.
So if you're going to have success in transformation, you're going to be doing something like this. Yeah, but I love the 4 steps. It really makes it more concrete.
Yeah. And, the last one, I say last, but it's imagining your outcome. So if you wanted to pigeonhole this into positive thinking, I guess you could say that. But, this is one that I know I've had trouble with, and a lot of people have that I've, coached on this and taught this system, is imagining your outcome. Your brain and you are constantly imagining every single day. But like we talked about way at the beginning, our brain is geared for the negative. So what do? We start imagining the negative outcome instead of the positive outcome, the outcome that we want. And that's very simply, yes, what is the outcome that we want? And if we want to even break it down farther between imagine your outcome and reviewing your direction, imagine your outcome is like that 35,000 foot view. And you being a pilot, you can appreciate that. It's looking down and just seeing everything laid out. Review your direction is more like short, like 90-day, 6-month type goals that you're trying to reach. The imagine your outcome, and it can be this. Again, this is the general sense of it. But some days you're not going to be able to be like, I can't see it, or I'm not able to see it today, or in the stage of life that you're in learning this process. Again, I go back to my colleague. It was hard for her to imagine playing with her kids, because this is mine too, of being a mom. for her, it's being a mom to her teenage boys at the time, and being there for them, and not just being a dependent or a burden to them. Like I say, that's similar to mine, because my 35,000 foot view is I want to be healthy. I want to be married to my wife and active with her for 75 years. 75, at least 75 years of marriage. So that puts me at 103 years old. That puts her at 101 years old. And, we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year. So see, that's the 35,000 foot view. I want that as part of imagining my outcome. What is that going to feel like, us, just being together, being active, being not depending on drugs, doctors, or surgery or procedures, or even our family. We want to enjoy our girls. We have 3 girls, and we want to watch them and be with them as they grow up, as they move on in life, as they realize what their purpose is, and be a support to them and not a burden in their lives. So imagine your outcome. Right. Sorry, I gave that example, but how do you do it? How do we make that concrete? A couple different ways. I'll give you, one way that I like is playing a 10-second movie clip, like a movie trailer of your life and what that's going to be. Often we hear these, near-death experiences where your life just flashes before your eyes. So similar to that, like what is that flash that you want to see? What's that 10-second movie clip? And then you can play it. You can either play it throughout the day at different times, like have set aside times like we do with Count Your Wins or learning your language, reviewing your direction, or you can also play it throughout your day. So while you're brushing your teeth, while you're in the shower, while you are maybe driving, while you're making your smoothies, you're playing this movie clip. And it might be hard at the beginning, but again, with all of these, with the practice that it takes, that's, you had mentioned the actions that we take show what beliefs that we have. So if we're taking these actions of imagine, because these are, imagine your outcome, that's an actual thing that you're doing, that will help reshape the story that you're telling yourself, because your brain, it doesn't know the difference of what is real in what has happened and what has not. It just has the perception of what it believes that meant. So there you go.
Yeah. Very good. Excellent. Good stuff. Now we talked about you have a very generous offer that you'd like to offer the Natural Nation. So why don't you just tell us about that?
Beautiful. This can be, our lives, sometimes we need a little bit of help, a little direction from somebody who's been there and done it before and has been doing it, is still doing it. So what I want to do is I'm going to provide a link that you can schedule a call, free call, call it a house call with me, a clarity call, so I can help you get clear on your mindset, get clear on the direction that you want to go. Normally it's $99. I'm going to waive that. And I just want to help direct you to where that you want to go, and then give you honest feedback on where you are now and help you put the pieces together, put the puzzle pieces together. So
that's excellent.
I'll provide a link for that to my calendar, and you can book a call with me.
Okay, very good. And I'll put that link in the show notes for sure. So if you want to get in touch with Dr. Wohlfert, just go to my website, davidsandstrom.com, and you can search for his name, and it's Wohlfert.
Yes, you got it.
Is that right?
You got it.
Yeah, okay, very good. You can search that way, or the episode number. Not sure what episode numbers this is going to be. So what's the best way to get a hold of you if someone wanted to just learn more about your work?
Well, right now I would say if you're on Facebook, join my free Facebook group. Be Your Own Guarantee. Like if you search on Facebook, it's a free Facebook group. It's a health and mindset driven community where we talk about breaking free from dependence on a broken system, so you can be your own guarantee for your health and your life, upgrade your health, your energy, performance, give you lifestyle measures to do that. And then also I'll give you my email address. go to doc@upgradedparents.com if you have any questions that you want to ask me. That's the best way right now to reach me. I'm also on Facebook, obviously, at Dr. Wohlfert. We can be friends there.
Okay. All right. Very good. Dr. Wohlfert, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with the Natural Nation today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, David.
For more, go to the show notes page at davidsandstrom.com/85. There you can find full audio and video versions of the podcast. We'll have links to all the resources that were mentioned, and we have downloadable transcripts as well as some type of a free content upgrade there as well. That's it for now. I'll talk with you next week. Be blessed.